Okay, I'd like to call to order the March 7th, 2022 meeting of the Long Hill Township Board of Education. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I always feel like I have to break out and take the flag.
I'd like to start this meeting with the moment of silence for the people of Ukraine. Okay, thank you. Adequate notice of this meeting of the Long Hill Township Board of Education was given as required by the Open Public Meetings Act as follows. Notice was sent to the Echo Sentinel and Daily Record on September 21st, 2021. Notice was posted on the bulletin board in the first floor entrance hall of the School District Administration Building in Gillette, New Jersey, and notices were filed with the Township Clerk, and notices were mailed to all persons who have requested individual notice pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Butler?
Here.
Mrs. Daly?
Here.
Mr. DeJamos?
Here.
Mr. DeGiorgio is absent. Mr. Grosskopf?
Here.
Mrs. McLennan?
Here.
Ms. Nyquist?
Here.
Ms. Ruvalo?
Here.
Mrs. Case?
Here. Communications. I don't have any communications. Okay, Dr. Mucci has no communications. We're gonna start then with board, committee, and liaison reports. I'll start with Carrie.
Morris County Ed Services, at the last meeting, two things. I think I'd mentioned they had closed one of their schools. It's been on the market for almost 3 years now. And they have what, I guess they termed it a hard offer. A real estate developer came in and put up a non-refundable deposit. And hopefully, working with the planning board, it should go through. He's proposing a residential complex of the exact same architecture of something that he developed and built in Franklin Lake, so hopefully it'll work out. The other thing is we made a preliminary review of the budget. The thing I mentioned before, Ed Services doesn't get any state aid and doesn't get any aid for property taxes, so they can go and do their budget a hell of a lot easier than we can. So at the next meeting, which is this Wednesday, we'll approve the final budget. Policy, you see on the agenda, there are policies that are up for the second reading, and a policy that's just being, when it says reviewed, it means there's been no changes to it, so it'll be easy to readopt. We handled the concerns that Tom had brought up regarding retention. On the site, the link goes to the station, not to a specific meeting, and as it stands right now, unless there's some limit put on it in some future date, all our meetings should be up there. I mean, that's it. However, also, Trevor, if I got it right, if I remember right, you also have a copy on our site. I mean, on our files or system somewhere. Now, if the station for some reason goes off the air, or YouTube, like I said, sets a limit, the policy now says that it will be retained. You go to our site. And I just want to mention one thing, and Dr. Mucci had mentioned it at the meeting, and I believe it was the school district in New Jersey. They had a board meeting, and it was not board members, but it was a member of the public who vocalized and said things that were against the YouTube rules, so to speak. They are banned from YouTube. So they cannot, their meetings will not be on YouTube. I'm only saying that because we're very lucky, nothing's like it happened. But just so people know that there's a potential. I mean, really, ultimately, there's a potential. With respect to governance, I think you should have all gotten a copy of proposed norms and principles for operation. We would like to get your comments back as soon as possible. to kind of like put them all together. We have our meeting next week, and maybe I'll say a preliminary final, so that after all the comments we put together and adapted into the document, be sent out again for final comments, and we can adopt it at the board. The other thing, with respect, we have, I don't know if it was mentioned before, we did set up governance training with Charlene Peterson. She's going to utilize the presentation that Marta delivered at the school board's conference, and it'll take place at the 6:30, to 7:30 before our board meeting in May. So that will be that. And I promised, excuse me, Adele, that I would remind people about our financial disclosure. We have 5 people who shall remain nameless who still owe it. You have time, but be really good to get in, because you know what's coming fast, right? Beyond next things comes is the CSA evaluation, and then comes our self-evaluation. So don't let it pile it so it's like one after the other. Give yourself a break between. So that's about it.
Okay, so it looks like the governance training will be May 9th. That's our meeting, so it's 6:30. Okay. Make a note of that. Any questions for Karen? Okay, Danielle? Any committee report or?
Oh, no.
Okay. Anne?
The March PTO general meeting will be this Wednesday, March 9th at 7 p.m. It is a virtual meeting. The Zoom invite, agenda, and the draft of the January minutes are on the PTO district the PTO page on the district website. All are welcome. And then the April, May, and June food day ordering, so last food day ordering of the year, closes on March 13th. So it's the last time you'll have to do it if you are someone who participates in food days.
And there's no, that date is solid.
They're
so
pretty
you
solid,
better-
yeah.
It's very solid.
March 13th.
You're ordering.
You missed that, you're in a lot of trouble.
And I also attended the Watchung Hills Regional High School meeting on March 1st virtually. So they are in a discussion of their budget as well. Some very similar conversations and topics that they're discussing that we have discussed. In brief, the presentation is online, the meeting is online, so if you want more details, it's all there. March 15th is their preliminary budget vote. April 26th, they're having their public hearing on the budget. Some points from their presentation that they had at the meeting. There was a decline in enrollment over the last 4 years. So they had 1,987 students in 2019 and 20. And for next year, they're anticipating 1,805 students. So it's almost 200 students less over 4 years, or 75 less than they have this year. And some of you might remember, we had a very large, we had the large classes that we kind of graduated up to them. And we followed the same trend ourselves. So they had a discussion of class size, and still seems to be ongoing with their staff needs next year in terms of class size, that they're going to investigate further at a forthcoming committee meeting. But basically they were discussing a ratio of 12-to-1 staff to student ratio, which would include like nurses and guidance counselors. So it didn't give a real sense of like what the class sizes were. And so that was what I think, maybe we'll get a report out on that at the next meeting. So that they can look at, as the enrollment is declining, their staff needs. They had some additions in their budget, including a furniture replacement for their classrooms that's on a 4-year cycle, some social and emotional learning and learning loss programming, which we've discussed here as well, to cope with COVID-related issues. They have new uniforms for their sports in their budget, a new truck, which we've been discussing, lots of technology upgrades, including they seem to be on a cycle for their Chromebook 1-to-1 initiative. They're year 6 of their cycle for replacing and upgrading them. Their building projects included solar panels on the roofs, LED lights, which I know we've discussed ourselves, and more. There's an issue with the long jump area for their track and field, so that's being replaced. And if you look at the report, they have the comparisons of their spending to similar districts. And the tax impact is yet to be determined, but they're looking at a 2% increase in the tax levy. And then another discussion that they had was just, I thought was nice, they had the extra academic support, again, for the COVID-related learning loss. They were running it after school. They didn't seem pleased with the amount of students who were coming after school. It was a lower participation rate than they had hoped for. So there was an update about how they were trying to move that program to the morning hours. Apparently, they have a lot of students who are dropped off early from the buses. Now, if I know anything about the high school, it starts very early. So in my mind, I was just thinking, how early are these students there? But they thought that it provides maybe more time for the students if they're in different sending districts, working in groups. But I just like the way, that the program wasn't working in one spot, so they're trying it in a new spot. So I decided to add that to my update. There we go.
Any questions for Anne?
Student Achievement is meeting on March 23rd.
Okay, Tom?
In their last meeting, the planning board has approved a new building to be built on Valley Road. It will hold, if I believe the number correctly, 52 units. But as we all know, with tying into the water and getting all final approvals on that, it's not going to affect us with having to worry about children for at least a couple of years. But it's in the works, just as the other property in Millington.
Okay. Any questions for Tom? No? Okay, Alex?
Thank you. On Friday, March 4th, we had a Buildings and Grounds Committee meeting that was held at Millington School. Mark Christina, Adele Valentin for the administration were there, and Tom Rostock for joining us.
Thank you.
We covered some, and we've talked about many of these kind of projects before, so I'm going to kind of gloss over them. But, window repairs, other kind of painting and patching items that we're waiting on a contractor to respond to those requests for. There's, district-wide HVAC initiative to make sure that, it's operating optimally and we're prepared with maintenance, regular maintenance. There was a tree pruning and removal program that I think we're obtaining quotes on. There was compliments issued to the DPW for assisting with the downed tree that was threatening late arrivals at school after the ice storm. So we had an initial conversation and meeting before we took an actual tour of the Millington School, which is kind of what I want to focus on. So we walked the school building and a little bit of the grounds outside. Mark is incredibly insightful in pointing out things that are going right and many of the things that need to be fixed and invested in over time. And he identified 6 items from the Millington School area in particular that need reinvestment. For example, the fire alarm system, resurfacing the parking lot, which is something that we're looking to do hopefully over the summer, exterior brick and waterproofing that need to be repaired. There's the back, I would call it the northeast corner of the school. We stepped outside, I looked up, and there's like a gaping hole in the side of a brick facade, which it's not a massive hole, it's not a threat to safety, but it's something that obviously can't be ignored and needs to be attended to. Replacing floor coverings in the library should be an exciting and visually appealing improvement that most people will benefit from. Replacing storage sheds with something that is a little bit more resilient and more user-friendly, I would imagine, and not helping protect the local wildlife. And then renovating. You like that?
Yeah.
And then renovating the laboratories. A few of these items you're going to see on the agenda, items 13, 14, and 15. But I don't want you to get distracted. There's the Millington repaving or resurfacing is not the one that's on the agenda now. That one's for Millington. I'm sorry, for Gillette School. So we had a really good tour. We hope to do the other 2 schools on I believe it's the 18th. And I thank my committee members for participating, asking great questions, being very engaged. And of course, as we end almost every building and ground meeting, we have more theoretical, hypothetical conversations about a more long-term, long-range plan, which is still in the making.
And we had an opportunity to look at the potential pre-K rooms.
Right.
So, very nice.
Any questions for Alex?
I'll make a comment. Dan had just told me earlier that, as a courtesy, information about the moving of the sheds will be going forward to the planning board, just as a,
And the width of the parking lot in the front.
yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Melissa?
About a week and a half ago, we had a virtual CPAC meeting, that Special Education Parent Advisory Group. Ms. Cologne, our Special Education Director, or Special Services, is that her actual? Special Services Director, conducted the meeting, and the topic was discussing how implementing and joining the special needs community and in the public schools is initiated, and describing that timeline. The next CPAC meeting, I think we're awaiting a definite date, and it will also be conducted virtually, and it will discuss the transition of elementary school to middle school.
Katie?
Okay, the Community Relations Committee met last week. We met last week. We discussed the updates to the district website. We want to thank Jack and Trevor for their hard work. It looks fantastic. We're hoping to see some smiling faces on the front page now that we are mask-free. And we also discussed, sorry, I lost my sheet, hang on. We also discussed that it should be an annual priority to kind of look in there and update on that. We also reviewed the COVID guidelines for after today. And we also discussed and decided against attending the Sterling Street Fair as a board, as we don't have, a specific topic to discuss. And if something comes up in the future, we might want to attend that as just a community relations interaction. Also, the Long Hill Education Foundation, aka FORCE. Our next meeting is Wednesday, March 16th at 8 p.m. via Zoom. Course classes started today, and I think there were 228 at the end, individual students that signed up for course classes. So it's one of the biggest classes ever. We have a lot of teachers giving classes, and I think it's fantastic to have people from our district teaching our students. It's just really exciting stuff. And also, the grant process completed. The approvals are going out this week, and it's really exciting because it's really a nice array of schools and everything from technology to kind of things for the buildings, and it's really exciting to kind of see the fruition of where the fundraising comes from and to see it go to the schools. So it's an exciting time, and hopefully at our next meeting we'll be approving it. And that's it.
I apologize. There was something that seeing you speak, one thing that came up in policy was providing sample statements or guidelines for responses from the board to the public if we get an email or stuff. And it was referenced that we would turn it over to community relations to come up with the wording, etc. So,
Sounds good.
Okay. Any other questions for Katie? Did you have?
I have Matt's report if you want for finance.
Yes.
All right. So the Finance Committee met on March 1st at 3 p.m. There were quite a few items on the agenda. We discussed some of the items that Alex had spoken about as well. With the maintenance reserve, the board office has proposals for repaving at Gillette and Millington. Gillette will commence in April and will fall underneath this year's maintenance reserve fund. Millington will commence in July and fall under the 22 and 23 school year fund. And the driveway in Millington School will be expanded to allow for a better flow of traffic when the buses are present, at the pickup and the drop off, because it can be tight there with the parking. There's capital improvement projects with faculty bathrooms at both Millington and Central that are in need of repair. And the board office is in contact with vendors and continuing to have the vendors sharpen their pencils and come back with some numbers for us. The lighting and HVAC projects, in order to move the project forward, the board office is separating the lighting project and, just to focus on that aspect of the project and leave it separate from the AC and HVAC project. The custodial and maintenance contract is currently out to bid. The accounts payable and transportation, you'll notice in item number 24 that we are saying goodbye to Tiffany Zona in the accounts payable department. However, she is hanging on to help us out with the transportation services coordination. And Dan was saying that that's really a great service for the district because of the continuity that she'll provide in that very important area. So there's a transition there that you'll notice in item 25. And then in item 26, we are welcoming in Moira Hardesty to the new position, to Tiffany's position. So that's item 24 to 26 for you. And also for educational data services, Robin has started looking into using this system, which is a cooperative system that can save up to 20% on school supply purchases. More importantly, it's going to take this process of handwritten purchase orders and move it into an electronic system that will save hours of time, I think, for the teachers and the administrative staff and the business office. And apparently it's much easier to use. So the ordering of, it's going to be streamlined and digitized, instead of being a paper process.
Any questions? Or not channeled by Ann? I'll just add that the negotiations committee has met with the administrators. Myself, Alex, and Tom are on that committee. We met once in between the time that we met since a board, and we will be meeting again on Wednesday. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Mucci.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to the board for their continued dedication to the committee work. So much is getting done and well reported on and much appreciated. We had an exciting week last week with Read Across America. Thank you to all of our volunteers. It was very enjoyable. We also had kindergarten registration last week, and we registered 73 kindergartners for next year. Typically, we would pick up additional registrants between now and the beginning of school, and that number is normally between 10 and 14 students in those months. So our current kindergarten class has 88 students. So that means that the numbers at Gillette are going to be typical to what we see this year. So the administrative team and the board in committees will be working through the best way to structure the population at Gillette, and we'll have more on that as we get through those numbers. The district has many families who have been personally affected by the war in Ukraine. We want to be sure that they know that we are here to support them in any way we can. We've reached out to the families personally, and they have connected us with a number of agencies where our students and community can raise funds and offer humanitarian assistance to those in need. So we have a number of motions related to those on the board agenda this evening. Also on tonight's agenda are a number of personnel motions for the board's consideration. Motion 33 relates to the implementation of our youth entrepreneurship program. And in that motion, the hourly rates of the 2 employees were listed in the incorrect boxes and should be reversed. So we'll either flip the names or flip the rates. That was just an error in preparing the agenda. I apologize. Motion 38 is seeking the board's approval to a curricular revision to our health and physical education curriculum to include the required instruction under Erin's Law. The purpose of the lessons are to help students develop knowledge, decision-making skills, and behaviors that promote personal safety. Each lesson addresses personal body safety, child abuse prevention, the importance of being able to identify a trusted adult, and choosing healthy relationships. Motion 48 is seeking the board's approval to re-energize programs related to Sustainable Jersey. Mr. Nestler is here tonight in the audience, showing his support and his leadership and enthusiasm for making Long Hill as green and forward-thinking as we can be. So we're asking for the board's support in bringing in these new programs to the district. We began our mask optional policy in all schools today. It was a very pleasant day, both outside and inside. Beautiful weather and smiling faces. As is always the case in our schools and community, the environment was respectful and student-focused. Our district continues to experience a low number of positive COVID cases. If you ever want to review the updated COVID numbers in our district, check out the dashboard on the website. Also increasing is our district's vaccination rate. At Central Middle School, 75% of our students have completed the initial vaccine series, and 23% of students have completed the initial vaccine series and the booster. At Millington School, 64% of students have completed the initial vaccine series, and at Gillette School, 50% of the students have completed their initial vaccine series. Since the start of the pandemic over 2 years ago, we've had minimal in-school COVID transmission and few outbreaks. Our region and our town are experiencing moderate to low COVID activity level and transmission rates. The District Health and Safety Committee has carefully reviewed the Center for Disease Control, New Jersey Department of Health, and Children's Hospital of Philadelphia recommendations for managing COVID in a K-12 setting. The committee also carefully reviewed all of the district and regional COVID transmission rates, data, and trends. We're asking the board's consent to deviate from the New Jersey Department of Health recommendations, specifically as it relates to in-school contact tracing. We shared our proposed plan with the Bernards Department of Health, and they stated that it was consistent with what other districts in this area are doing and understand our desire to forego the recommendation on contact tracing at this juncture. We would like to suggest the following procedures. Positive COVID cases, individuals that test positive and feel well enough to return to school may do so after a 5-day quarantine, but we would enforce that those individuals do wear a mask on days 6 to 10. That is consistent with the CDC. We're continuing all of our mitigation efforts in other regards, ensuring and encouraging that students, faculty, and staff remain home when sick, that we offer as much information about vaccination clinics for all age-eligible individuals, that we're maintaining the circulation of clean, fresh air in our schools. We offer scheduled hand washing breaks as appropriate to encourage students to wash their hands during the day. We have a regimen of cleaning all touch points and heavily trafficked areas frequently with environmentally safe cleaners that also are reduce the risk of the spreading of any type of virus. We're working still under minimizing extended periods of close contact among students, faculty, and staff. We are screening all visitors for any signs of COVID-related illness. So a temperature check and the simple check form about any symptoms. And we would like to communicate positive COVID cases through modified contact tracing. So when we're asking for the board's consent to adopt modified contact tracing, what we're saying is we'd like to treat it very much like any other infectious disease that may pop up in a classroom. We all hate getting those dreaded letters that say there has been an outbreak of lice in your child's class, right? It requires that you check them out at home and get the black garbage bags out. And we're looking for something similar to that with COVID. What we're asking is that we will inform families if there's a positive COVID case in a student's class at Gillette and Millington, or if there is a positive COVID case in a student's cohort at Central. In these cases, we would ask that families closely monitor their children for any COVID-like symptoms and report such symptoms to the school nurse. We will not require asymptomatic in-school close contacts to quarantine. If an individual is exposed to COVID outside of school in an activity or a gathering and remains asymptomatic, the school will not require them to quarantine. It is a little different with household exposures, because what we have seen is that in household exposures, the probability of contracting COVID is much higher. So asymptomatic individuals who experience COVID exposure in their household, if the exposure is a household contact and the individual is vaccinated or has tested positive for COVID in the last 98 days, the individual can return to school but should remain masked and monitor symptoms. They can elect to test. If the household contact is unvaccinated, they should do the 5-day quarantine, receive remote instruction, or teach remotely, and should consult with the school nurse about those masking guidelines when returning to school. For siblings of a student who meets the COVID-19 exclusion criteria, they need to be excluded from school until the symptomatic individual receives a negative test result, unless the sibling has tested positive in the last 90 days or is fully vaccinated. Changes also in testing. In cases where testing is required, the district will accept rapid antigen tests, at-home tests, or PCR tests. So that's an expansion just to make it easier to get people tested quickly and return to school when safe. With regard to test to stay, while using a modified contact tracing model will not be enacting the test to stay, as asymptomatic individuals would not be excluded to school. We have over 150 individuals registered for test to stay, and if circumstances change and warrant testing, we could enact the test to stay program in a matter of 2 to 3 days. So we would be in good shape if we need to do that. While there is no formal motion presented to the board to approve these updated procedures, we were advised by our board attorney that they be discussed at the board level and feedback be considered before they are officially implemented. So at this point, if any board member has any questions or comments on their recommended change, and if we had some sort of consensus, then we could move forward with enacting these as soon as tomorrow.
So at this point, if anybody has any comments or response, this would be the time. Any thoughts?
Just so the public is aware, she was Dr. Mucci was kind enough to send it to us very well in advance, so everyone was able to review it in advance of this meeting, in addition to you discussing it today, so thank you.
One of my questions that just popped in my head when you were going through that, Dr. Mucci, is how are students or parents reporting that they're vaccinated still? Like, is there, like, do people know that they're just supposed to email the nurse? Is that, like, well known in the district?
So many individuals do report directly to the school nurse. Wherever an individual receives their vaccination, they're entered, whether it be at a pharmacist or at their pediatrician, they're entered into the New Jersey immunization system. We have a student information system called Genesis, and we're in the process of syncing those two symptoms. Not only will this help us get the most recent up-to-date information on COVID vaccinations, but it also will facilitate registration for any new student to the district.
Okay.
So the data that you shared with us earlier about 50 to 75% vaccination rate in 3 different schools, that's based on voluntary disclosures from the families?
So far, yes, because Trevor, correct me if I'm wrong, we don't have those systems speaking to each other yet.
No, they're speaking.
Oh, they are? Okay, so it could be, depending on whether or not the nurse, I got this information from the nurses in the last couple of days, and when was the last time we uploaded those systems?
They happen every night.
That happens every night. Okay, and I can give I'll give an update, weekly as we see changes in those.
Yeah.
Good to know.
I will make the note that This has been a long and difficult period, and I applaud the administration for the last year and a half, and the nurses as well, for spending so much extra time following through with the contact tracing. It was one of the many strategies in how to kind of mitigate, an outbreak in our community. I know it was not easy work to do, so thank you all very much for doing such a great job.
I second his thoughts.
And the staff.
I want to say, to the faculty and staff, just now that it's mask optional, I think there's a lot of people breathing a sigh of relief and seeing their students' faces, and while I applaud everyone making the decision that's right for them, these steps forward to normalcy, I think, is just good for everyone, and I'm happy that we are where we are, and I appreciate the sacrifices of our faculty and staff over the last 2 years, which is crazy. So thank you.
Dr. Mucci, can you report, do you have an idea, percentage-wise, of either children or staff who've decided to continue to remain masked?
So it's only been a day, and it might have been the excitement, of the first day, and things may change. And it might also be kind of a fluid situation where when the flu comes back, maybe more people will opt to wear them, but at this point today, there were, I would say, an average, and this is a total guesstimate because we don't record how many people are wearing, but maybe 10, maybe 15%. Also, some were wearing the masks, and also I would say that students, especially as they get older, were exercising choice during the day. So students might choose to wear the masks in the hallway or in classes where they were working in a certain closer proximity.
I'll consider it. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, so based on that, the consensus is
Go ahead.
to go ahead with what you.
Okay, and I will pass along the thanks to the faculty and the administration, and much appreciated. The two pieces we will be continuing with for the foreseeable future is we have been told that we are required, there is no board discretion on the testing of unvaccinated staff members, and that will continue at least until the end of the school year. And of course, as we had no question about doing, it is required that there be virtual instruction offered to anyone on a quarantine.
So interim business administrators update.
Alrighty, good evening. It's been a busy month finalizing our annual school budget for 22-23 and continuing our improvement in the current school year. We sent out an overview of projected revenues and expenditures on Friday for the 22-23 school year that I will briefly report on as requested by the Board of Education. The Finance Committee has met 3 times to discuss the budget, as well as meeting our administrative team and all stakeholders in the budget process. But first, we'll speak about tonight's agenda items. We have resolutions for our January financials, approval of subscription busing and preschool tuition rates, which remain flat year over year, which is no increase. Our certificate of implementation on our single audit regarding coding of accounts has been addressed. And on a lot of the budget explanation and budget reports, you'll see 1,000% increase. And if you look to the line above it, you'll see 1,000% decrease because we had to recode those areas of expenditures. We have disposal of obsolete library books, and those books are worn, torn, pages missing, etc. We have a resolution for our architect to perform bid specs on upcoming renovations for the district, including staff bathrooms and a new fire alarm system. It's relatively early to go out to get specifications, but we're trying to beat people to the market. And obviously, we want it done in a timely fashion. We want it done over the summer. And if people could book their summers or contractors could book their summers, we're going to get an aggressive figure. And just as a point of information, Millington has 3 different fire alarm systems, and the newest portion is over 15 years old. So we're going to renovate the entire school. Some of the technology dates back to 1980, 1990 for a fire alarm system. Finally, and well overdue, will be the completion of the project at Gillette School, which will be completed over Easter break to repave the entire parking lot and playground. That's going to be used, maintenance reserve monies, which is a savings account for maintenance expenses that we can utilize. We have approximately $700,000 in our maintenance reserve, and we'll be using a portion of that to do the paving this April. We have it lined up. We have our vendor in place. He's part of Ed Data, which is one of the cooperative buying groups that we use, so it's a very, very aggressive price. And it's, you know, between the three schools, Millington will be done over the summer, and it's really been overdue to get these projects done. And when it all is said and done, it's going to probably be about $600,000 worth of paving work we're going to have done in all three schools. At this time, I'd like to now focus on our 22-23 school budget, which I've given you a brief budget explanation. And we're utilizing the school software, which that means is that the school software provides budgets, 5 different versions that we could just plug in once. There's no human error. It's in a centralized system. We're not using Excel to do any type of recalculating or creating accounts. So everything we do is basically, I don't want to say packaged, but it's in our financial package, which makes it easier for us moving forward to actually implement our 22-23 budget. We could just pick our step that we want to implement, make it our 22-23, and it automatically imports it. So there's not another rekeying component of that budget. The current budget for 22-23 has no reduction in staff, which would mean our teachers, our teacher aides, any type of staff that we currently have on board. It also includes $1.2 million for our maintenance and custodial contract, which includes an added layer of supervision, which 5 years ago you went out and bid and awarded, and then 4 years ago you have eliminated that spot. So we're going back to that position of a supervisor provided by the successful bidder that would oversee all of these individuals. Right now, it goes from those individuals to our person, and there's no intermediary. So we're acting as both the supervisor, the director, the implementer, and in speaking with our consultant advocate, there are 30 school districts that have this type of organization, and we're the only one that does not have that layer of supervision. And we want to be with the other 29 with that layer of supervision. We are reducing our cost for parents on the pay-to-play with a maximum cost of $200 per sport or activity. That was a priority from Dr. Mucci and this Board of Education. We cannot do it in one complete school year. We're going to try to sector it, and maybe next year cut it to 100, cut it to 50, and then look to eliminate that cost. It's our belief, the leadership belief for the school district, that those costs should really be on the Board of Education side and not on the parent side.
Excuse me, is there going to be a family limit?
That we haven't discussed yet. We just have reduced. Took all of our numbers. Right now, a family could pay maybe $1,100. In our case, it would be 6, 2, 2, and 2. And if a sport or an activity is less than 200, they would pay the lesser of. So finance is going to provide a policy to pass over to policy to actually outline this, so it's nice and clean. So in future years, we know exactly what the parent's responsibility is and the school district's responsibility is. We will be continuing our implementation of the free and reduced lunch for all of our school population, which has been very, very, very successful. And it's a great thing we're doing, really great thing. We've spoken about our capital outlay budget. We will continue to improve HVAC in all of our schools. We'll be paving the Millington parking lot, renovation of restrooms in Central and Gillette schools, replacement of an old fire alarm system at Millington, replacement of storage sheds at each school, some brick pointing where needed, as well as waterproofing some areas throughout the district. This is all going to be done within our 2% tax levy cap allotment and property tax. If additional monies are available from prudent spending, we will be looking to upgrade our maintenance fleet. So right now, our maintenance fleet is not in the capital outlay budget. We're going to look to squeeze, and hopefully wind up with 60 to 80K of extra dollars out of $1 million to really look to buy some vehicles to improve our fleet, to have more ownership of our fleets, because a lot of the fleet is really old and worn out, and it should be in a little bit better shape, to be quite candid.
if we do decide to move the pre-K program, is there money set aside?
That, we're looking to do that in this school year prior to June 30th.
Okay.
Right, so we have that earmarked. We have another room in Central earmarked for a renovation that's going to be done this school year. So we're progressing quite nicely with our budget. At our next meeting, we will be approving our preliminary budget. It's almost like policy. It's the first reading. You could still make changes to that preliminary budget until our final budget, which will be on May 9th. That'll be our public hearing. And once we approve the May 9th meeting, that's our budget that we'll be moving forward to in the 22-23 school year. Just if you wanted to look at the document that we handed out briefly, I tried to give you an overview of where our revenues are and expenses are, and it's quite simple. Page 1 in aggregate will equal pages 2 through 9 in total, but our software doesn't take a cumulative total, it breaks it down individually. So you'll see some numbers on page 2 that you'll have to add. You'll have to add a number on page 8 and one on page 9, but our numbers do in fact equal. Some of our highlights will be withdrawing $1 million from capital reserve. Again, that is a reserve account of excess dollars that have been accumulated year over year to fund our capital outlay project, and that will be on page 1, and that is item number 1. You will see that's a decrease of $700,000. We need what we need. A lot of what we've done this year has been maintenance, and we're catching ourselves up. So we should hopefully, I'm looking to, in future years, really, for capital reserve, coming right around that $1 million mark of capital outlay projects that you'll need year over year and funded through your capital reserve. Item number 2 is the big number in any budget. It's our tax levy, and that's a 2% increase year over year. And the far right will show you that increase, and that's what's really nice about using our financial software. Items 3 are all of our state aids, and we are anticipating flat state aid. We have a provision with a $25,000 loss in state aid. We have another budget with a $50,000 loss in state aid. So we're anticipating the worst. If we do get additional funds, that's a nice problem to have on how we would spend those monies. So if you read in the paper over the next couple of days with state aid, and you say, oh my goodness, we lost $31,000, we as a finance team have those provisions made already. So it's not going to be us coming back to the board and saying, or Dr. Mucci, where are we going to make those reductions? We have that already pre-planned. On pages 2 through 9, you will have our expense side of the budget. That will show you what our audited figure is for 21, what our current budget is for 22, and what our proposed budget is for 23. Our current budget for 22 is, it's our original budget from plus any transfers coming in. So what has happened is we've been spending a lot of dollars on HVAC equipment. So if you look into your maintenance area, which is 261 and 262, you'll see a decrease from this year into our proposed year. But this year we spent an inordinate amount of money to really correct all the problems we had. So I don't want you to think we're shortchanging anything in our facilities. What we've done is played catch up. We're not all the way caught up, but we feel very, very comfortable. In other areas, we're going back to pre-COVID numbers. We've had numbers that have been really reduced, field trips, copy paper, copy machine costs that we haven't been using with school not in session. So we're going back to some pre-COVID numbers in a lot of areas. Kudos to our admin team to really look to hire people in-house as opposed to contract out. We have a lot of those areas. We have reclassifications of expenditures like we've stated as recommended from our auditor. But this budget is, student sensitive. I mean, everything we do is for, the output of our student. And when we refer to it, it's really, we call it like our annual student budget. It's really not a school budget. What we do is, get the money into the classrooms and really try to progress to make, Long Hill a lighthouse school district. And I say that, with full dedication to doing it. And I appreciate our administrative team, Dr. Mucci, the board support for everything we have here. At our next meeting, we could provide a lot more detail if requested. I mean, I could provide under every line of salary, you'll see every teacher's salary, you'll see all the items that are included in that. Here I try to give you a brief overview of what we have, why we're doing what we're doing. $1 million capital outlay is a healthy capital outlay budget. It's being funded within the legal parameters of the 2% cap, and we're hoping that our aid remains flat. But then again, when you read tomorrow or the next day when we get our state aid, just remember we have those other provisions in place. Anyone have any questions on our budget?
Sometimes we take, or there are things that happen that you can take exceptions. Like, they say if there's certain costs are over the.
Correct.
Did we apply it? Yeah, waivers. Did we take any of those?
We have $117,000 of bank cap, so that's $117,000 of monies that we can spend, but there really is no expense to spend it. So you get to bank it for up to 3 years. So we have $117K moving forward of bank cap that we can use for increasing the tax levy without asking a second question or going to any type of voter for any type of approval.
And,
The headline would be that we're staying at 2%.
Correct, the flat 2, yes. Yep.
and were you thinking maybe about sometimes in the budget, you can have those healthcare cost waivers?
The
Do we have any
healthcare,
of that?
since the state plan through the State Department of the state plan has decreased, so statewide, they've taken that cost out of it.
I
You
gotcha.
can no longer have an allowance for increase in healthcare costs, because they're saying the state went down. If you want to save money, join the state.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
That was our negotiation, yeah.
Yes.
One thing that we had, not because we wanted to, but because of extenuating circumstances, we had anticipated within the budget extraordinary aid. It doesn't look like that's something that you
Right.
have.
Correct.
So
Very
if
good.
if we do get some extraordinary aid, do we have an idea of what we would do with that, or does that go into some sort of?
Well, I like to control the factors that we can control.
Yes.
And I think capital reserve, you could see if you really look on page 1, great find, by the way. If you look at your extraordinary aid of 76,311, okay, if you look up to budgeted fund balance, which is line 1, page 1, page 1.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, your top line, do you see your difference of 76,311? Top right.
Yes.
Okay, if you look, we budgeted 76,311 in extraordinary aid. So I increased our capital, our budgeted fund balance, the exact amount that we're losing, that I'm not reflecting in extraordinary aid. Just in case the state doesn't give it to us or something happens, we have that money budgeted to balance our budget. If we do in fact get the extraordinary aid, my philosophy is to use that to filter into our maintenance reserve, to filter into our capital outlay reserve, so then we in future years can dictate on how we want to spend it.
So right now, essentially, that 76,000 is coming from what normally would have gone in capital reserve or maintenance reserve. Once we get, assuming we do get the extraordinary aid, we then move what's budgeted into our capital reserve or our maintenance
Right,
reserve.
or it was a really tough year and we have to use it for current expenses. So-
Yes.
So we have a lot of options as opposed to basically pigeonholing ourselves into using it as a revenue. It's just a different concept. When I look at school districts through my experience, when you're using extraordinary aid, that tells me that you're not as solvent as you should be. And it just really sending the wrong message. And we want to use that money as we feel needed, as we dictate, to put into some of those reserves. So sooner or later, when things get super tight, you may have to use it as a revenue. But at this point in time for the next school year, we're very comfortable that we do not.
So the way we would use it for next year is just how we are doing some extra stuff in the spring for the, we're spending from our reserves
We
to
would.
do the paving and some of the other activities in the next few months before the end of the school year.
We would.
As opposed to,
What would happen is usually in the month of June, we would do a resolution stating we want to increase our capital reserve and maintenance reserve in the amount of X and Y. And that's what we'll be using a portion of that extraordinary aid for. The monies we're using to do these end-of-year projects are from prudent spending from July 1st to current to give us extra dollars to do some of these items. So that's how we're grabbing that money. So there's two different buckets. The prudent spending is getting us to do the classrooms that are going from Gillette to Millington. And then in the future years, when we increase our reserves, we're doing a formal board resolution in June, and that would be the extraordinary aid money coming in that we're going to earmark for a purpose that we deem fit.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dan, am I reading this correctly? Are you saying that our total budget would be 19,225,000?
That is one of the three portions. You'd have to add capital outlay on top of that, which is on page 9.
Okay.
And then on page 2, you would have to add 115,600. Those are the three numbers that make up our annual school budget on the expense side. Funds 10, 11, and 12. And I circled them for you.
I do appreciate that.
This is really thorough.
What was the first number?
The first number is on page 2, 115,600.
Yep.
The second number is on page 8, the number you referred to, 19,225,000. And your third number is on page 9, $1,100,000.
Any other questions?
Any questions, concerns? If you want to come in, we could go through it in detail. I need to practice, so whatever you like to do, just feel free, shoot me an email, and we'll make ourselves available.
Okay, thank you. The thing you did mention, I was thinking about that before, was around the field trips. I hope that there's a way to encourage field trips for next year. I think about the younger kids when they're so excited to go out and do something, and I think my son's in 3rd grade, and I think maybe they want somewhere in kindergarten at this rate, right? So they'll have completed 3rd grade, so I'm hoping that teachers feel confident next year to maybe to break out and do some of those things, because it really is a big difference. I could take my son to the same place, but going with the class trip is just so huge. Okay, so any comments from the public on agenda items?
I would like to make one
Okay,
point.
wait, Tom.
Going back to the numbers.
Sure.
You were talking about the extraordinary fund balance. Is that not correct? The 76, is that correct?
Right, that's in the current year. Next year, it's 0.
Right. And if they do give that to us, that'd be all well and good. I would just like people to know that that is less than 0.4%.
Up to,
So if we get this big bolt of money, it's not like we're swimming in it.
correct.
Okay.
Okay. We can ask questions. We have people who have comments, so let's stay in order. At this point, the Board of Education welcomes comments from any member of the public on agenda items only. Please note that as per Board Policy 1120, a total of 15 minutes is allocated for public comments at any single board meeting. In order to provide residents the opportunity to comment, individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes each at any particular board meeting. The board may extend these time limits at its discretion. Any questions should be directed to the board president, and depending upon the nature and complexity of the question, it may not be answered during the meeting by the administration. If so, the response would occur after this public portion of the meeting has concluded. Everyone has the freedom to speak, but please be advised that anything said in public may have legal ramifications, and there is no protection regarding statements made by the public. And please state your name and address before you begin.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Nestler, and I'm the 5th grade science teacher over at Millington School. My address is 239 Arrowwood. The Sustainable Schools program is an offset of Sustainable Jersey, which is a program endorsed by many colleges and universities across New Jersey, which endorses sustainable activities and sustainable programs within the school. The certification is a point-based system based on recycling programs, eco-friendly activities, and strongly endorses school gardens, which is something that we've been working at over at Millington School. Once looking at the point system, we have seen that many of these programs are actually things that have already been implementing and have been widely used across the school district. This is a great opportunity to teach, especially the students, about a greener future, and it's also a huge opportunity to get students, parents, and the community at whole involved in making real-world changes. This program was endorsed by the Youth Entrepreneurship Program, which Dr. Mucci, myself, and several others in the district attended just a few weeks ago. And it was brought up there and mentioned actually by several of the people, which is what sparked my personal interest in it. So I just want to thank you all for your consideration in endorsing this program and the certification, and hopefully in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move to resolutions. Number 1, the minutes. Karen, will you move those in, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? Okay, roll call?
Mrs. Butler?
Yes.
Mrs. Daly?
Yes.
Mr. DeJamos?
Yes.
Mr. Grosskopf?
Yes.
Mrs. McLennan?
Yes.
Ms. Nyquist?
Yes.
Ms. Ruvalo?
Yes.
Mrs. Case?
Yes. Financials. Danielle, will you move those in, number 2 through 18?
So moved. Second.
Question? Roll call?
Mrs. Butler?
Yes.
Mrs. Daly?
Yes.
Mr. DeJamos?
Yes.
Mr. Grosskopf?
Yes.
Mrs. McLennan?
Yes.
Ms. Nyquist?
Yes.
Ms. Ruvalo?
Yes.
Mrs. Case?
Yes. Anne, will you move in number 19 to 21, special education?
So moved.
Question on 21?
We need,
We're talking about home instruction? Or did you move 19 to 21?
Yes.
Okay, just lost the thought there. Talking about home instruction, is that something that's going to continue to be necessary as we're coming back to school? It will be? Thank you very much, I approve. I will.
Roll call?
we need a
We
second.
need a second.
Oh,
Second.
there you go. Roll call?
Mrs. Butler?
Yes.
Mrs. Daly?
Yes.
Mr. DeJamos?
Yes.
Mr. Grosskopf?
Yes.
Mrs. McLennan?
Yes.
Ms. Nyquist?
Yes.
Ms. Ruvalo?
Yes.
Mrs. Case?
Okay, Tom, will you move in items 22 to 36 personnel as, with the amendment to number 33 to switch the hourly rates so that Ms. Fitzsimmons' rate reads 65.79 and Ms. Taylor's hourly rate is 37.98, and that both the hours are not to exceed 10.
So moved.
Second.
Question? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Butler?
Yes.
Mrs. Daly?
Yes.
Mr. DeJamos?
Yes.
Mr. Grosskopf?
Yes.
Mrs. McLennan?
Yes.
Ms. Nyquist?
Yes.
Ms. Ruvalo?
Yes.
Mrs. Case?
Yes. Alex, will you please move in curriculum number 37 through 40?
So moved.
Second.
Questions? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Butler?
Yes.
Mrs. Daly?
Yes.
Mr. DeJamos?
Yes.
Mr. Grosskopf?
Yes.
Mrs. McLennan?
Yes.
Ms. Nyquist?
Yes.
Ms. Ruvalo?
Yes.
Mrs. Case?
Yes. Melissa, will you please move in items 41 to 42 policy?
So moved?
Second.
Question? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Butler?
Yes.
Mrs. Daly?
Yes.
Mr. DeJamos?
Yes.
Mr. Grosskopf?
Yes.
Mrs. McLennan?
Yes.
Ms. Nyquist?
Yes.
Ms. Ruvalo?
Yes.
Mrs. Case?
Yes. Katie, will you move in items 43 to 48 other, and also please read 48 into the record?
So moved?
Second.
You have to read.
Well, I thought I'd read and
Oh.
after it's,
Okay, sorry.
You can read it now.
Yeah.
okay, sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, here we go. Whereas the Long Hill Township Board of Education seeks to participate in sustainable Jersey for schools, to focus attention and efforts on the matters of sustainability and to pursue initiatives that will lead to sustainable Jersey for school certification. Whereas the Long Hill Township Board of Education and the superintendent seek to support and work with school staff and administrators, students, and parents to ensure safe and healthy environment for students by encouraging our school community to implement sustainable, energy-smart, eco-friendly, and cost-effective solutions. Whereas extensive opportunities exist to teach students about ecological, economic, and social sustainability, environmental health, and nutrition, to integrate sustainability, education into classroom learning, and to support students in becoming leaders in making their schools healthier and more sustainable places. Whereas many opportunities and choices exist for schools to use resources more efficiently, to reduce, reuse, and recycle, to follow green building standards for construction and major renovations, to form school partnerships, to eliminate toxic chemicals, to purchase or produce clean energy, and to purchase recycled paper, energy-efficient equipment, and other green products to protect our global environment. Whereas sustainability means using resources wisely, saving money, and reducing our impact on the environment, all of which will ensure the future health, safety, and prosperity of our children. Whereas the Long Hill Township Board of Education commits to the formation of at least one sustainability leadership team, also referred to as Green Team, based on the guidance of Sustainable Jersey for Schools. See the Create a Green Team action. Your district green team can be designated from a pre-existing group within the district if desired. Whereas green team members help schools adopt policies and practices addressing areas such as sustainability education and professional training, green purchasing, waste reduction, indoor air quality, energy saving initiatives, and community partnerships. Whereas the Long Hill Township Board of Education will encourage green teams at all district schools by providing networking and educational opportunities. Therefore, it is resolved that the Long Hill Township Board of Education agrees to participate in Sustainable Jersey for Schools and its board's intention to pursue certification for schools in the district. We hereby appoint Andrew Nestler to be the district's liaison to Sustainable Jersey for Schools. We do hereby recognize all district schools as agents to carry out our commitment to building a sustainable school district through the implementation of Sustainable Jersey for Schools actions. We agree to complete district actions and to support the district schools in completing their actions.
Thank you. I did warn her in advance of that. But any questions from the board? Okay, roll.
Seconded, yeah?
It was?
Yes.
And a roll call, please.
Mrs. Butler?
I will say yes, and thank you to Mr. Nestler for your points and explaining further your interest in this and just your general knowledge on the topic and your enthusiasm for tackling this.
Mrs. Daly?
Yes.
Mr. DeJamos?
Yes.
Mr. Grosskopf?
Yes, with a special thank you to those people who are taking donations for the suffering people in the Ukraine.
Mrs. McLennan?
I should say no just to be funny, but no. Yes.
Ms. Nyquist?
Yes.
Ms. Rivolo?
Yes.
Mrs. Case?
Yes.
Did we implicitly do the addendum?
We didn't do the addendum yet. We had one other.
Not on mine.
I know,
No,
we got it emailed.
It literally
Oh, okay.
came in this afternoon.
Okay. So I could have, Karen, can you move in the addendum?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions?
What it was?
What is the addendum?
It's.
Oh, sorry. So it's resolved that the Long Hill Township Board of Ed will allow the collection of non-perishable food, hygiene products, sleeping bags, first aid. We have a whole list
Okay.
that will be, it's sponsored by St. John the Baptist Ukrainian Church in Newark.
Oh,
And we have a group of parent volunteers who have said that if we put the collection boxes in the schools, they will take everything to the church.
wonderful. Okay.
Second?
I have that.
Okay, yes. Okay, roll call, please.
Mrs. Butler?
Yes.
Mrs. Daly?
Yes.
Mr. DeJamos?
Yes.
Mr. Grosskopf?
Yes.
Mrs. McLennan?
Yes.
Ms. Nyquist?
Yes.
Ms. Rivolo?
Yes.
Mrs. Case?
Yes. Okay, so again, congratulations on the Sustainable Jersey for Schools to Mr. Nestler for tackling that and the rest of the team that will work on that. Very appropriate. It is New Jersey STEM Month, if you didn't know that, so it makes a lot of sense. I also want to thank Dr. Is it Netune, who came in, the dentist, who donated toothbrushes and toothpaste. Thank you to Tiffany in the BA office, and a welcome to Moira, and also just very exciting about the Youth Entrepreneurship Program. Do we have any items for discussion? Any old business? Any new business? Okay. Any comments from the public? Okay, and will you move us into executive session?
The board will enter into private executive session to discuss a harassment, intimidation, and bullying report. No action is anticipated following executive session.
I don't keep them, do you?
Second?
Second.
Okay. Thank you.